The Polyglot Gathering is brought to you by italki. Become fluent in any language.
Okay, good afternoon everyone. Great to see people here. Sorry for the late start. Combination of factors on the last day. No worries. So yeah, and this is the second year in a row actually that I'm at the end of the last day, so I always think that everybody will have already gone back to their respective places and won't turn up, so it's great to see that people have. This talk is all about the science of successful blogging and earning a living online. Obviously, you guys here in this room all have a very special talent, which is language learning, or languages I guess, and you're good at languages. And so what this talk is about is how to harness that and to take that online and to, many of you are probably already teachers or translators or whatever, and this is all about how to extend your reach and become much more, take the skills that you have and take it out to a wider audience in such a way that it can actually become a source of income for you. So you guys are the experts. There's so much potential in this room. The number of languages that are spoken in here and the amount of people around the world that want the skills and knowledge that you guys have is phenomenal when you think about it. I'm going to keep this talk the focus of the talk very narrow. It's about successful blogging. The organisers asked me to stick very specifically to blogging and not any other mediums. And it's also going to be aimed at beginners. So any of you guys who are already have things up and running and you're looking for some ninja tricks, that's not going to be what you get here, although I'm very happy to talk to you afterwards. I'm also going to try and keep everything quite short because I'm going to leave as much time as possible for Q&A. Although given the time, we'll have to see how that works out. So a little bit about me. My name is Olly and I run a website called I Will Teach You a Language. And I have a podcast as well, which I encourage you all to check out. And so I've been running this now for about 2.5 years. It's still a fairly young thing, I think. I feel like it's quite recent. And as a result of this blog, and to a certain extent the podcast as well, a lot of cool things have happened. TV and radio, run some workshops with, I'm sure some of you guys are going to know Olly Richards. We've run Polyglot workshops that many of you here have actually been to in different countries. I've also released a number of courses and products and books like this, which have become pretty successful. Many of them are #1 across Amazon. So it's been great, and I've done a lot of stuff in the last couple of years. However, 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, there was this. Nothing. There was some stuff in here, a few bits and pieces in my head, but in terms of the business, if you like, the thing that I do now that is my full-time occupation that kind of sustains me, there was nothing. And so everything that has that I have now online that you will find if you search for my stuff has been a relatively quick thing, and this is one of the great things that's possible when you start to harness the power of the internet. Things can happen very, very quickly indeed. And I've had a very curious phenomenon in the last year or so, which is that when I do workshops and come to events like this, I actually get more people coming and asking me about things like blogging and business than actually about languages, which I hope isn't a reflection of my languages. But nevertheless, I've noticed this happening a lot recently, and so I thought it would be good to come here and actually teach some of this stuff. Right. So the whole kind of genesis of this project started when I was living in this place. Anyone know where this is? Doha, yeah. This is Doha in Qatar in the Middle East. Beautiful place actually. It's not really on the tourist circuit, but it's really, really nice place. And it must have been about 2.5 years ago I was here, and I started to hear, I was doing a lot of reading at the time because there's not much to do in Qatar. It's one of those things. You read a lot of books. And I started to learn that there were people out there who were not doing traditional jobs, that they were using, they were creating online businesses based on hobbies or passions or skills of some kind. And this was a big moment for me because until that point, and some of you might relate to this, I really didn't have any concept of how businesses operate online. Obviously we're all familiar with the Amazons and the the big kind of online stores. But it was a totally new thing for me to learn that there were people who were essentially teaching their hobbies or their skills or their passions online. And I discovered this, and at the time, I didn't know who anyone in the Polyglot community was. It was totally new. I kind of turned on YouTube one day, typed in Polyglot or language learning, and saw all these people. I saw Richard and Luca and Alex and Benny. And, a lot of people, I think, at that moment, and maybe some of you guys are feeling this right now, would look at that and would think, wow, so many people doing this stuff. What have I got to contribute? Who's going to listen to me? And I think I did have those feelings, those thoughts at the time. But I also took it as a sign to think, well, hang on, there are all these people doing these things online. That's a good sign. It means that there are people interested in these things, that there is a market, if you like, and that, I know a thing or two about language. I'm sure I've got something to contribute. And I didn't know exactly what it was. So I did have doubts, and I also knew absolutely nothing about blogging or the internet or anything at that point. And it's a critical point for a lot of people. And there was one very, very important thing that I did at that stage. Do you know what it was? I started, yeah. I started. And most people will probably fail at this hurdle. They simply won't start for whatever reason. Doubts, questions, concerns. There are always a lot of reasons, a lot of doubts. And I think one of my big strengths is the fact that if I have an idea, I act on it. And sometimes that means stuff goes the wrong way up. But more often than not, actually, the fact that you start something and you try something means that you at least get a chance at succeeding. So that was one of the things that I did. And so if you take nothing else away from this talk other than this, it would be that the best time, if working online or starting a blog or anything like that is something that you want to do, the best time to start is now, or ideally yesterday. Because, I was sitting there at that time, and then 2.5 years later, here I am now, and it's totally transformed everything that I'm doing. So let's talk about blogging in particular, because I'm going to focus on that. Some time ago, and I guess many of us will remember the time, which maybe not the 50s or whenever this was, but certainly the time pre-internet. In the days before the internet, one of the main characteristics of this time was that sources of information were very, very controlled. When we were at home, if we wanted to learn about the world or get information, we would turn on TV, listen to the radio, read the newspaper, receive things through the mail from time to time that this lady's getting right now. And basically the power and influence and information and knowledge were in the hands of very, very few people. Normal people were simply consumers of whatever it was that powerful people out there wanted to disseminate and for us to hear about. And so if you wanted to start a language-based business, whether it was teaching or maybe course creation, whatever it may be, the only way that you would typically have to make your thing a success would be to spend huge amounts of money on marketing, because you would literally be competing against every single other language-based business out there. But obviously things have now changed. Information is not centralized, it's not controlled by a small number of people, and the big thing that's changed now is that power has shifted and you can get information on demand. And it's absolutely key to understand this. Anything that we want to know, we're not reliant on what's written in the Encyclopedia Britannica or whatever. We're not reliant on whatever's published on the front page of the Times to get our information for that day. We get information on demand, mainly fueled by search. How many people have used Google or YouTube to search for something in the last hour? Right, exactly. So you don't wait for the newspaper to arrive to get your information. And this is the key thing that's changed, because for a teacher, for someone who works with language, and I think throughout this talk I'm going to use teacher to mean really anybody who works with languages. There are lots of different variations. Teachers can effectively become independent publishers. And of course we don't mean publishing in the sense of publishing a traditional book, but publishing information, things, their thoughts, your ideas, your lessons, whatever it may be. You can now be an independent publisher, and you can do that through the medium of the internet, and people around the world searching for different things can find you that way. And so the real opportunity that blogging affords you is to become that publisher. And this is one of the main reasons that blogging is such a powerful thing. There are other things you can do. You can do podcasting, you can do videos, but blogging for many people is going to be a good thing simply because with the written word, you have the biggest access to search engines. So if someone goes into Google and typed in how to learn Russian, Google is going to find you, most likely because of the stuff that you've written about Russian. And so you are the playing field has been leveled. It's a huge seismic shift. Often people don't really understand. And this is the major opportunity that you have, obviously with the internet and with blogging in particular. So what I found actually is that besides these obvious characteristics, there have also been lots of benefits that I found to myself personally through blogging. First of all, I don't know if any of you guys relate to this, but I feel like I need to have a creative output of some kind. If I can't produce something, I go crazy. I feel like I'm just kind of restricted in a straitjacket of some kind. It might be because I actually studied music at university, and I've always had this kind of creative thing in my life. And if I can't create in some way, I feel suffocated. And so blogging allows me to do that. Anything that comes into my head, I can just get out there in an organized way. It's made me a better thinker by a long stretch. If you talked to me about language learning 2.5 years ago, I already knew all the stuff that I know now, but it was all in my head in a fairly kind of scrambled up way. One of the great things about blogging and writing is that you actually get to organize your thoughts, and it makes you a better teacher and a better communicator in almost every single way. When I started giving talks, for example, a few years back, I was nowhere near as confident as I am now doing it, simply because I hadn't had that experience of organizing my thoughts, putting them down on paper, and actually getting them out to the world. So anyone here who's done a master's degree or a PhD will relate to this. That this whole thing of organizing information in your head and having to actually process it for the benefit of the reader rather than just for your own consumption. Obviously, authority. I guess there are some of you here who are not just here for casual interest, but maybe you've heard of me before, you know something about what I do, and so simply by virtue of the fact that I have some kind of presence online, it does give you a kind of authority which can lead to a lot of other things, such as the things that I mentioned earlier. But also, in terms of business, and this is something that I didn't really appreciate at first, which is why I mentioned it earlier. I didn't appreciate exactly how something as relatively straightforward on the face of it as blogging can actually become a business and how it can function as a business. So I thought I'd take a second to show you exactly how that can work, and it's very, very simple. A blog is something that people find through various different ways, and then the way that this transitions to a business, or the way that this actually can contribute to the business of some kind, is as people find you, you then can suggest or offer them products or services. And that's essentially how a blog it's how it kind of starts to take on the characterization of a business. So, and this is why you see so many big companies these days starting blogs. I mean, it seems kind of weird because a McDonald's website, why should McDonald's have a blog? Well, they know that there will be people out there who resonate with the kind of stuff that they talk about. Can't imagine who those people are, but there will be some people. And so that's why people that find the McDonald's blog in some way can be pushed towards, in some way, buying their products. Products in this case being something physical that you buy one-off. But there are other businesses like hairdressing, for example, who offer a service, and a hairdresser with a blog can do all kinds of things like teach you about how to do your hair in a cool way, and then eventually you're going to want to go and get your hair cut by that person, right? So this is basically how a blog relates to business. And so if we compare this to language learning now, it's exactly the same way. So for you guys, you can offer, from the blog, you can offer things like products, like this, Language Learning Foundations, which I hear is excellent, or you can offer services, which could be teaching. And this is something that obviously all of you guys can relate to. But from this, if you start a blog and you intend to offer products or services of some kind, the question really is, how can you compete with big companies? Because you're all familiar with the Rosetta Stones and the Duolingos and the Pimsleys of this world. So, how can one of us, who's just one person starting a blog one day, actually start to compete? I mean, what's the deal here? So let me ask you, as a blogger, if you compare a solitary blogger with a language company that you might be familiar with, what's the key advantage that a blogger has? What's the one thing that we have?
Flexibility.
Personal brand.
Okay, say some more about personal brand.
Like you can create a bond, a personal link, and this is exactly what people want because they're fed up of all the corporate, like very smooth speech. So then you can they can relate to you and on the exact same level because you speak their language and everything else.
Right. So you go to the Rosetta Stone or the Duolingo website. Who do you engage? What's the first thing that captures you? What do you engage with exactly?
Machine.
Yeah, a machine. Well, basically, I mean nothing. A set of colours and logos. I mean, whereas as a blogger, the one thing that you've got that any big corporation is never going to have, and it's the reason that you have the raison d'être in the first place, is that you have a personality. You can be you. Who remembers their favourite teacher from school? What was their name? Shout me out some names of your favourite teachers. Come on, I want to hear your teachers, your favourite teachers' names. All right. Notice how quickly you could recall this person. And the reason is that we like to identify with personality, with people. We don't like to identify with big corporations. We end up having to because they have the power, but ultimately, you know, the reason that I stick my face over all my things is not because I think I'm particularly nice to look at, but it's because when someone sees me, that's something to identify with right there. And as a teacher, you all know what kind of relationship you can have with your students, right? It's a very, very personal, intimate relationship. And so what you can do by blogging and having that presence is you can create a personal connection. And you don't need to create a personal connection with all 6 billion people in the world. You know, in order to have I mean, how many students do you need to have a thriving teaching business, for example? I mean, those of you who teach, I mean, how many students would you be happy with? Could you make a decent living from? What, 20? 30, something like that? I mean, when you consider how many billions of people there are in the world, you don't need to connect with that many people to make a huge impact on you personally. So this is the business side of blogging, and it brings us to this one really key concept, which is audience. When you have a big company who's trying to, like say Rosetta Stone, who's trying to sell their products, they try to get it into as many hands as they can, and really the amount that they can advertise out there in the world is directly proportional to the amount of to the success of the business, right? It's how many people are going to buy their products. For you as a blogger, it's a little bit of a different thing, because you have the potential to build this thing, which is an audience. If you imagine those of you who are language teachers, who that's your bread and butter and that's what you do, you find teachers perhaps through referrals and things like that, but if you want to get new students, what do you have to do?
Engage.
You've got to write an ad, haven't you? You've got to write an advert. And so when you're looking for new students, where it all kind of, you live or die by the quality of the advert that you write. And this might be whether you stick it up in a local news agents or whether you do a teacher profile on italki or something like that. That's what you've got to get new students. But if you compare that to the online teacher, with blogging, what that enables you to do is to get people to notice you and engage with you and like you first through publishing content, blog posts, videos, and things like that. And so, if you imagine that, you're interested in learning Thai, and you've been following someone who teaches, who writes and makes videos about Thai online for the last year or so, and that person also offers Thai lessons, who are you more likely to ask to teach you? That guy that you've been following for a year and reading their article, or the ad that you see in the local paper? It's obvious, right? And so through blogging, this gives you the chance to build an audience. And with that audience comes a relationship, comes trust, and all these kind of things. And so it's the audience that you build through your writing or vlogging or whatever every week. It's the audience that you build that becomes your business. And this is very, very different to the traditional models of online business. And so blogging, ultimately, if we say, well, what is this all about? Blogging is the science of serving your audience. Blogging is the science of serving your audience. So let's talk a little bit about how you actually do this. And the big question, obviously, is how do I get noticed? I run a Facebook group at the moment where I've got a bunch of language people in there, and everyone is sort of starting their own blogs and things like that. And one of the big questions that comes up all the time is, well, how do I get traffic? People say, how do I get people to come to my blog? And this is a huge topic that I can't possibly cover in one session. But what I've found after writing, I don't know however many hundreds of blog posts, is there are certain things, certain key things, that if you do them, you dramatically increase the likelihood of people finding you and then coming to engage with you. So I thought I'd show you what those things are. So first of all, well, here you go. So defining your audience is the number one thing. And this is simply, for most of you guys, it's probably a question of simply asking, well, what are you great at? A lot of you guys speak a bunch of different languages. There's probably 1, 2, or 3 that you feel particularly strongly with. Maybe it's your mother tongue. So you are going to be great at something. I don't know what that is. You're going to know what that is. But it's very, very important that you, first of all, decide who you are going to write to, who you're going to serve, who is your audience going to be, number one. Number 2 is to start a conversation with those people. This is not about you just writing anything that comes into your head. This is about a conversation. Once you start the conversation, you help those people with whatever problems they're having with languages. And you do that by creating world-class content. And then you do it consistently. By this, I mean, for example, you might publish a blog post a week and you don't stop. Most people stop. It drives me crazy. They write great things, they write brilliant blog posts, help people all the time, and then they stop because they get busy or something. So these things, if you do them consistently, will bring you success with blogging, without a doubt. You can make it a lot more complicated than this. We could go into all kinds of different tactics and tricks. But this, every time I stop doing these things, everything starts going wrong. So this is the foundation of everything that you do. And then when it comes time for you to actually transition this blogging into a business of some kind, whether products or services, then the very simple thing that you do is you offer people a way to continue working with you. And that might be in the form of giving lessons, for example. So, for you guys in this room, you've got a natural advantage. You guys are all language experts. So you've got half of the job already done. And you're going to be great at these 3 things, number 2, 3, and 4. You're going to be great at starting conversations with people about languages. You're going to be great at helping them by teaching them. And you're going to be great at creating world-class content. The reason I say world-class content, by the way, is that why not create world-class? There's 2 million blog posts published a day. Probably more, probably 3 million by now. If you want to stand out and you want to, attract people, my view is that you have to do it with the best possible content. So you're going to be great at these things because this is what you do, this is what you live and breathe every day. But conversely, there are 2 reasons why you will probably, or 2 reasons that if you don't succeed for whatever reason, it's going to be down to these 2 reasons. And first of all, this is defining your audience. Coming back to this, it's very, very easy to ignore because for a lot of people here in this room in particular, the thing that we most enjoy talking about is how to learn a language, right? And so for us, the kind of default thing to talk about in many cases is, well, how do we learn a language? And from a perspective of, if we stop thinking about the blog for a second and actually think about the business, which is where we want it to end up, whether that's acquiring, teaching students, or whatever that may be, from a business perspective, when you actually come to do things like sell your teaching, or sell a course that you've got, or sell a book, anything like that, if you don't have a clearly defined pain point for someone, something specific that they really, really want to be able to do, want to learn, or that they want help with, everything that you do in terms of actually trying to sell your products or services is going to be so much harder. And for me, with everything that I do now, in terms of courses and things like that, I always end up coming back and spending most of my time thinking about this one thing. And it's this thing that whatever you look at, whether it's in language learning or any other kind of area, the thing that comes up over and over again is is not properly defining the people that you want to help, okay? And so let me give you an example of this. I'm going to give you 2 blog ideas, and feel free to steal them, by the way. One of them's better than the other. Number 1 is polyglot tips, and on this blog I'm going to teach you tips and tricks for becoming a polyglot. Blog number 2 is survival Chinese for businessmen. Now, let's talk about this pain point for a second. Polyglot tips, where's the really burning pain point? What's the thing that people really, really want and they need to do quickly? And they want you to help them with, and they want a solution now. What is it? Learning multiple languages. It's not a life and death thing, is it? Okay. What about number 2, survival Chinese for businessmen? Can you give me a scenario in which this could be a very big deal indeed? Are you speaking from experience?
Closing a deal. You're on the flight there.
Somebody's going to be posted to their factory in China.
Closing a deal?
Survival Chinese, closing a deal? No. So, I mean, imagine how many businesses now are working with China around the world. So many, right? Imagine you just got a big contract with China and you are flying out there in 2 weeks to meet your new business partners. You don't speak a word of Chinese. How important is it for you to learn the pleasantries in Chinese? It is extremely important. Is that something that you think people would pay a fair price to learn from you guys?
Yeah.
Exactly. So can you see the difference between the defined audience and the pain point? Right? So this is, I think, especially for people in this room who love languages in general, one of the big dangers. And so what I'd like to invite you to do now is to just take a second and turn to the person next to you, and whatever your situation is, whether you may have a blog already, you may not, you may be thinking about it, you might not, but I'd like just you to talk to the person next to you for a second and just bat around a few ideas and think, well, if I were to do this, if I were to start a blog of some kind, what would, based on my own skills and expertise, what would my best audience be? What is that specific group of people? What would I be great at? Right? I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that, and then I'll maybe help you out with a couple of ideas. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Works every time. Great. So, anyone got any ideas? Anything they'd like to share or throw out there? Sure.
Oh, okay, I have to have a microphone. So now I'm going to embarrass myself. So what I just told to Shani, a new friend of mine, so that I was thinking about the idea, like I was thinking about 3 years or 4 years ago, is basically how to survive in your new place of your living when you move to a new city, and actually what steps to do not to end up alone in 2 years. So to take steps to build up a new social group around you.
Any particular country or language?
I was thinking about a few countries because I was been living in Poland for a while, in Sweden, and now I live in London. And I was doing the same mistakes with partners, like not thinking about signing up to social meetings or not spending money for a coffee with someone or something like this. Like really basic things some people not think about.
So the idea of someone who has moved to a different country and they are feeling alone and they want to start to integrate with people, right?
That's like to feel more at home.
Right. Is there a clear pain point there?
Yes.
Yeah, very much. Now, how about this? How about if this idea, instead of that, but saying, my service is for people who have just moved to Spain and they want to learn Spanish quickly so they can integrate with people and have a new life. Is that more or less grabbing for you? Yeah, so the more specific you get, the better. Anyone else like to?
Here it happened something very interesting. I forgot your name. Leah. She offered me help me in my French pronunciation, and I thought it was a great idea. Then I was in problem. I got a problem to say what to offer to her. I said how to learn a language. She said no, I'm not interested in that. And so I asked her, what do you want to know? And so I asked my audience what they are interested. And so she said, I would like to know or to find a way to sell my product. And I said, okay, I guess I can help you to promote yourself. Generally, I post a lot of things on Facebook with my face and I will help you. So, and she said, I want a product. And I say, I would write a book on how to sell yourself on Facebook or social medias.
And the answer is, you should ask. If you don't know, you can ask. We just made a deal.
Yeah.
Great, business connections forming already. I mean, I'll leave that because I want to keep it focused on language learning, but it's a great idea.
Okay.
Well, I did this before. I have like kind of 4 different groups I'm targeting. One of them, IT specialist, the Russian-speaking IT specialist who wants to improve their English and find a job abroad, particularly Ireland. So I have a client like this at the moment in my private coaching. So and when he approached me, I told him like we can do this English plus tips how to find a job and move to Ireland.
Yeah, so one of the ways that you can make this more specific is not necessarily doing it by language, but by doing it by demographic. So can you imagine if you are an IT consultant, an IT engineer, and you find something that you're an IT engineer in Russia and you need to learn English. Can you imagine how strong that is if you suddenly find a blog on the internet that says English for IT engineers? I mean, like, you're just gonna, that you want that, right? That's exactly what you want. And so this is why I'm spending so much time on this, because this, for everybody, is, if you don't get this right, everything else that you come to do will become so much harder. So, having said that, the next thing is consistency. And again, I've lost count of the number of times I've met someone with a fantastic idea, they've got everything going for them, and then they simply don't keep it up. Blogging is not an overnight thing, it's something that takes years to grow. And so for anybody who wants to approach this, you've got to approach it with the mentality of, I'm going to start this now and I'm going to keep it up for the long term. But if you do that, if you can keep it up, do what I did, which is basically publish a blog post a week for over 2 years. If you can do that, which is harder than it sounds, you can, and to make it good, but if you can do that, you are ahead of 99.9% of other people who can't keep it up. So these are the 5 things that, if you do them, will account for 99% of your success. Now, consistency, by the way, can mean anything. It doesn't have to be once a week. It could be once a day. It could be one video a day or something like that. But the point is that you need to decide what you're going to do and stick to it. Because also, when you do it time and time again and you stick to it, that's how you get better. Your first blog post is going to be awful. Sorry, it's the truth. Mine was terrible. Whatever you do the first time, your first video, your first book, it's going to be rubbish. But then, after a year of doing it every week, it's going to be amazing. And so it's through consistency that you hone your skills and you get good at it. So, once you have done that, and you have started your blog, you've defined an audience, and you've worked your butt off creating content and done it consistently, then you get to monetizing. Now, this is obviously big deal, and I'm not going to spend much time on it because this is something that everybody asks, but I would say, well, first thing first, are you doing this? And if the answer is yes, then okay, we can talk about monetizing, but for most people, you're still going to be working on this, right? But there are many, many ways that you can. And if you define your audience, if you start that conversation, if you help them and you do it consistently and you build that relationship, there are many, many ways that you can monetize and start to generate income for your project, from your project. And the way that you decide how to monetize and how to actually create an income from your blog or whatever you're doing, your audience ends up telling you what they want. And so all you've got to do is be having that conversation and to be listening to what they're doing, and by doing that consistently over time, and the answer will emerge. And there's so many different things you can do. There's ebooks that you can write. One of the simplest things, many people in the room have probably already written them. There are courses or live events or workshops. You can have adverts on your blog and do affiliate marketing, which is, for example, I might say to you, hey, have you heard about italki? They're really great. Here's a special link that you can go, and if you then sign up, then I might get a commission from that. And then there's teaching and coaching. I've done a mixture of all these things. They all work in different scenarios, but most of all, if you're building your audience and you're talking to them and communicating with them, then the answer will present itself very, very clearly over time. And again, any of these things that you try and do without a well-defined audience that knows you and that you're having a conversation with, it's just going to be so much harder than it needs to be otherwise. Okay. So, how many of you guys, let me just ask you, how many of you guys in the room already sell something online? Okay. About a quarter of you. All right, cool. So, I'm sure that many of you have experienced that selling your books or your courses or your coaching is not always as easy as you'd like it to be. In fact, it can be a really, really hard thing to do. For those of you who have yet to experience that or even start a blog or anything like that, it is tough. It's something else that you have to learn to do, because I think many of us instinctively are uncomfortable with selling, even though we've got no problem. It's funny, like even though we've got no problem going out there and looking for students or looking for translating work or whatever, as soon as it goes online, suddenly there's a kind of funny feeling about it. And so I thought I would offer you a little bit of insight into, from all of the things, the products and services that I've offered over the last couple of years, the things that I found really make a difference, and that if you do these things, really can tip people over the edge from thinking, no, I'm not interested, to actually, oh, actually, that sounds really cool. First thing is, get people excited. Not much to say about this really, other than most people don't do it. And so many things that you see online are just not interesting and not exciting. People, if they want to do business with you, if they want to take classes with you, they've got a dream of some kind, right? There's something that they really want. And you've got to get them excited about that in order for them to want to work with you. Second thing is just tell them about the benefits of what you're offering. Now this is something that applies to all of you, whether you're doing work online or not, which is that very often it's the benefits of what you're offering that people never talk about. So for example, if you look at a teacher profile, if you're a teacher and you're writing an ad trying to get more students, you will probably talk about your qualifications, your years of experience teaching, the course on French pronunciation that you took last summer. None of that is actually what the student wants. What does the student really want?
What's in it
This is someone learning French, by the way. What do they want? Speak French? What do they really want?
So that accent, right accent.
Want to sound like a native speaker? Anything else?
They can get speaking French.
What's their dream? Get speaking French with a great accent. Maybe they, I don't know. Maybe they want to get a French boyfriend. Maybe they want to retire to the south of France. Maybe they want to trick people into thinking they're a native speaker. These are the things that people really want. And so whatever it is that you're doing with your offers, you need to make sure that you're not talking about yourself and what you can do and how great you are, but talking about what it is that they want. Number 3 is provide proof and demonstrate authority. Pretty self-explanatory, but if you are, for example, blogging about Spanish and you want to get people to learn Spanish from you, is it going to make more or less of a difference if you put a few videos of you up speaking awesome Spanish? Going to help, right? Likewise, authority. You know, if you have whatever it is that you've done, if you've given speeches before, you've got certain qualifications, you've got to make those things clear, because often people simply don't trust you, especially if it's online stuff. Don't trust what you're doing. So you need to think about different ways of actually demonstrating those things. And the last thing is to be yourself. Do you remember what we said right at the beginning about the fact that corporations are all faceless and they have, all they're trying to do is they are just pounding you with adverts and things like that, accosting you in bookshops saying, hey, have you tried the new Rosetta Stone? It's great, that kind of thing. You've got an unfair advantage, which is you and the relationship that you can build with people. And so in order to do that, you must be yourself. Don't hide behind the blog, don't hide behind your words. Put yourself out there, show people who you are, let them connect with you. Be vulnerable, talk about your strengths and weaknesses, be honest with people, because the more that they can relate to you, the more they're going to connect with you on a human level and want to keep working with you later. Alright, so I mentioned earlier a Facebook group that we have. We've been, a lot of you, how many of you guys are in the Language Freedom League Facebook group? Oh, quite a few. Oh, wow, loads of you. Awesome. So we've got a group on Facebook that we've been doing for a while, where there's loads of people in there, all language experts. Everybody is wanting to start a journey of some kind that can lead to an independent business. And we've got loads of people in here. I've actually produced a couple of free courses for people that show you all the techie stuff. You might be worried about things like, well, how do I start a blog? How do I do this and that? How do I set everything up? I've actually put together a whole bunch of courses. It's totally free for everybody in there, so that you don't have to worry about that stuff. Because the worst thing, when you've got this dream of, okay, I'm going to show someone how to move to Spain and integrate, stop feeling lonely and start a new life in Spain within 2 weeks or whatever. That's the dream, and you've got to hold on to that. You can't be hung up by all the tech stuff. And so the courses and the group here is going to help you through all of that stuff. And there we go. We've got loads of people already started new blogs and projects. It's so exciting. Is Gary here? Don't think he is. Gary is someone in the group. Some of you might know him from the Ad One Challenge. He's just started this project recently, the Language Learning Library. Within the space of about 10 days, he just went crazy, and we were having all these conversations in the group, and he was getting all these ideas and started the blog, and he's already up there getting thousands of people a month coming to the website. So lots of people doing loads of cool stuff. If you'd like to join, totally free. We'd love to have you there. You can get there by going to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/freedom. You can put that into your phone or your computer, and that will redirect you to a Facebook group. You just got to ask to join, and that'll let you in. So I'm being told to stop. So with that, I'll leave you with a 6-step plan. Sums up everything we've talked about here. First of all, decide on the audience that you'd like to serve. We've done quite a lot of that. Create a blog and start writing. Self-explanatory. Use Facebook groups to research. We haven't really had the chance to talk about this, but we talked earlier about how you need to start a conversation with people. Facebook groups are the best way to do this, because you can simply go and watch what people are doing, watch what questions they're asking, and if you get 10 questions from people in the Facebook group, you've got your first 10 blog posts sorted, and you know that that's stuff that people want to know. All right, so a great place to solve the question of, well, what shall I write about? The answer's all in Facebook groups for you. Solve problems with amazing content. We talked about that already. Publish regularly and don't stop. And one last thing, invest in your education. So important. There's a lot to learn, and don't try and figure it all out by yourself. Talk to people, network with people here, ask people what they're already doing. It's the best way to learn and to improve. And with that, I've got a little question slide here, but I'll leave this up to you instead. I think we might have to stop. Do we have time for questions, or do we need to finish?
No time, no time.
No time? Okay, it's a shame because we started 10 minutes late, so I'm going to have to take questions in the bar later. But, yeah, I'll probably reveal far too much later on. But I hope that's useful for you guys. Hope to see you in the Facebook group. Have a great end to the conference. And